In the zombie-infested town, two survivors were running down the street. They are none other than Glenn and Nicholas, who are about to set the house on fire. There is a zombie writhing under the car at this moment. Glenn instinctively wanted to deal with it, but Nicholas stopped him. He wanted to handle it himself. This zombie used to be their teammate and was abandoned by Nicholas and Aiden, leading to its current state. At this moment, his heart was filled with guilt, sending off former teammates. At that moment, gunshots could be heard from the east. It was the sound of Carol and the others fighting back against the gang of thieves. They didn't waste any time and quickly made their way towards the feed shop. Michonne and the others, hiding in the pet store, also heard the gunfire. This was their chance to escape. Now, the zombies were all moving towards the source of the gunshots. Michonne decided to wait until they were gone before meeting up with Glenn and the others. They had to remain quiet and not alert the zombies. On the other side, Rick, the tough guy, gritted his teeth and ran desperately. Sweat dripped down his handsome face. Finally, he reached a fork in the road and quickly opened the RV. Their keys were all inside the vehicle. Rick's hand was severely injured, but he had to endure the pain and quickly started the car. Heading towards the community, Michonne was still waiting for the zombies to move away. Bruce, who had been bitten, handed her a crumpled piece of paper. Michonne unfolded it and saw that it was a farewell letter Bruce had written to his wife. Given the situation, he thought he might not be able to return. Michonne wrote a line on her hand and showed it to him before returning the paper to Bruce. The zombies outside had almost gone, but there was a noise coming from inside the house. The situation was precarious as attracting the zombies would be disastrous. Michonne approached and realized that there was another room behind the canvas. The sound was coming from inside, and to her surprise, there was a zombie in there. She swiftly swung her sword and took it down. However, the unfortunate part was that the noise had already attracted the zombies outside. Michonne had initially thought there were only a few scattered zombies, but when she reached the doorway, "Oh my God," she whispered, taking a sharp intake of breath. The horde of zombies had reached the town. Drawn by the commotion happening here, Michonne quickly pondered her options and decided that they had to make a breakout now. Waiting for the horde to approach would only lead to certain death. After opening the door, Michonne took the lead and cleared the zombies at the entrance. The horde was just 5 to 6 meters away from the house. The group quickly moved towards the outside, but unfortunately, the two injured members slowed them down, making it difficult to shake off the pursuing zombies. There were simply too many of them. The horde could easily overrun the town. The woman running behind, unaided, tripped and fell to the ground in a panic. A few people realized it was too late. He finally understood what Michonne had told him earlier. Sometimes there was no choice. Going back to save someone would result in everyone's death. They could only helplessly watch as the zombies feasted on their good friend. They couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. What they needed to do now was to swiftly flee forward. Meanwhile, Glenn, they finally reached the feed store. They had originally planned to set it ablaze and run, but to their surprise, the building had already been destroyed. They quickly searched for another structure, only to realize that a horde of zombies had surrounded them from behind. On the other side, it was the same situation. As they watched the zombies getting closer, Nicholas found himself at a loss for ideas. In the end, he reluctantly chose a direction to escape. Meanwhile, Michonne and her group were forced into a narrow alley, with the horde of zombies close behind. They didn't have time to think. Their only option was to attempt to climb over a metal gate. Michonne and Bruce used something as a makeshift foothold, and Heath was the first to crawl over. Scott followed suit. The zombies were just a few meters away from them. Finally, Michonne and Bruce climbed up simultaneously, but their feet were grabbed tightly by the zombies. Glenn, they faced the same fate. Unlucky, they entered a dead-end alley, and the doors there couldn't be opened. They couldn't climb over either because there were zombies on the other side. It was essentially a death trap. Glenn took out his handgun and started shooting the approaching zombies, but it was only a drop in the ocean. The zombies behind quickly filled the alley. There was no other option but to shoot and kill, even if it bought them just one more second of survival. Soon, their magazines were empty, and can only take out your dagger for physical combat. Michonne's side of Heath and Scott keep shooting to try and get them away from the zombies. Bruce was already reaching his limit, and after enduring a few more seconds, he was dragged down. What awaited him was the excruciating torment of being torn apart. Perhaps it was the zombies attracted by Bruce or Heath's desperate shooting, but Michonne managed to break free. They looked at Bruce in agony. Feel a heavy sadness in your heart. On the ground, there was the message he had intended for Michonne to deliver to his wife. He would never be able to go back. Heath, who thought he had experienced the cruelty of the apocalypse through frequent outings, now realized that witnessing the helplessness of watching his teammates die in front of him was the cruelest of all. He truly understood what Michonne meant by having no choice. Glenn and Nicholas were still holding on. Glenn kicked the zombies away and climbed onto a metal box. He then pulled Nicholas up as well. This 1 square meter of metal box became their last life raft. There was no end to the zombies in the alleyway, all concentrating on trying to tear them apart. Looking at these zombies, Nicholas is in a trance again. The guilt of abandoning his teammates filled his mind, as if all the zombies below were there to punish him. Gradually, he started having a nihilistic thought of putting an end to it all. Despite Glenn's constant shouting and urging, the voice sounded weak in his mind. All he could hear were the gnashing teeth of the zombies. He said,
"Thank you."
Nicholas pointed the gun at his own head. Couldn't hear what Glenn was saying anymore. Nicholas took his own life. The sound of gunfire at close range startled Glenn and sent him into a paroxysm of confusion. They both fell to the ground. Glenn's fall brought him back to his senses, but immediately afterwards he saw countless zombies start to gnaw away. He couldn't hear anything from outside anymore. His ears were filled with the sound of blood gushing out, followed by the ripping of various internal organs. After this episode aired, numerous viewers sent blades to the director. The squad, which originally consisted of 10 people, was now reduced to only 3. One of them was severely injured, and they supported each other as they arrived at a riverbank. Michonne looked up at the sky, but there was no thick smoke rising as Glenn had said. Heath could only offer comfort, saying that it didn't mean something had happened to them. Perhaps they were just hiding. Michonne held back her tears. She knew deep down that Glenn was most likely gone for good. She looked at the words written on her arm and realized how weak and powerless she was. She couldn't promise anything to others. Now was not the time for sadness. The community was still ahead of them. Rick, driving the RV, arrived on the road outside the community. As soon as the horde of zombies reached here through the woods, he honked the horn to lure them away again. He took out his walkie-talkie and contacted Glenn to ask if they were on their way back. However, there was no response from Glenn. He tried to contact Tobin, but still no answer. Thankfully, Daryl's voice came through the radio. He instructs Sasha and Abraham to continue leading the zombie horde while Daryl quickly rides his motorbike back to the community to support them. Naturally, Rick could hear the gunfire coming from the community, but he couldn't go back. He had to let Carol and the others handle it. The zombies need to be tackled first or there will be no way to live. After conveying this message, Rick finally tended to his own injured hand. However, at that moment, the door suddenly burst open, and a man stormed in, firing his gun. Daryl, hearing the gunshots, sensed that something was wrong. Fortunately, the bullets didn't hit Rick, despite the intense pain in his hand. Rick fought back and lunged at the man, but another attacker quickly joined in. Meanwhile, Daryl stopped his car, and the walkie-talkie only produced static noise. He called out a couple of times but received no response. Combined with the gunshots he just heard, Daryl realized Rick might be in danger. Instead of rushing to the rescue, Daryl decided to rendezvous with Sasha. Recalling Rick's earlier instructions, they had to finish the task at hand. However, Rick was really good and he fearlessly confronted the two attackers. He pulled out his handgun and eliminated them both. Upon searching the bodies, Rick found food from the community in their pockets. It wasn't difficult to guess that the previous honking and gunfire were related to these individuals. At that moment, Rick caught sight of 3 more people sneaking around in the rearview mirror, undoubtedly planning an ambush. He calmly picked up his rifle and took them out with a few well-placed shots. These 5 individuals were the ones Morgan had let go, and they nearly cost Rick his life. The car was having problems starting at this time. Rick was very anxious. He could already hear the distinctive growls of the approaching zombie horde. The fact that the car won't start means the zombies will continue to make their way to the community. Deanna stood in amazement as she witnessed the massive horde of zombies approaching the community. Her breathing became labored, never having seen so many zombies. Ahead of the zombie horde, a figure stumbled forward, desperately shouting for the gate to be opened. It was none other than Rick. Upon hearing his voice, Michonne and the others swiftly opened the gates to receive him. The RV remained unable to start, forcing Rick to make a frantic escape back to the community. Unfortunately, the zombies eventually made their way to the community. Thankfully, Daryl and the others managed to lead away half of the zombies, preventing a catastrophic outcome. As soon as Rick entered, the group hurriedly closed the iron gates. Slowly, the zombies surrounded the community. The residents inside are on edge. They questioned whether the fences would be enough to protect them, and a sense of suppressed tension permeated the crowd. Rick simply tended to his wounds and came into the crowd and said, "Everyone could see that half of the zombies were drawn here by the previous honking sound. They have us surrounded now. I understand that you're afraid, as none of us have ever experienced something like this before. However, we are currently safe. The wall was hit by a truck, but remains intact. They are strong enough to withstand the zombies." He emphasized that once Daryl and the others returned, they would lead the zombies away once again. Glenn and Nicholas will make it back too, so try not to make too much noise during this time. Despite Rick's attempts to console the residents, some remained pessimistic. Think the community is now a graveyard. They believed that none of this would have happened if they had not ventured into the gorge and provoked the zombies. Aaron, being a reasonable person, he came forward to tell everyone that the gap in the gorge had opened itself. The zombies will come out no matter what and will also head towards the community. Rick's plan prevented this from happening, and they were able to distract at least half of the zombies, which would have been a great success had it not been for the accident. Aaron blames himself. "It's all my fault. Earlier, Daryl and I went out to recruit people, and I wanted to enter the canning factory to find some supplies. Daryl originally insisted on searching for survivors, but he listened to me. We fell into a trap set by those people, and I lost my backpack there. It contained photos of the community. The reason those people were able to find us was because of my foolishness." Tiana, feeling desolate, walked towards the distance, ignoring the calls from others to come back and oversee the situation. Perhaps she knew that the current situation was beyond her control. The people in the community hadn't experienced much hardship before. Now that the zombies had surrounded them, many people began to give up and no longer cared about the community's rules. They all rushed to the food storage room to grab things and enjoy a few meals before their demise. Deanna felt a deep sense of sorrow. This was the community she had built. Back in her house, her son Spencer also brought back a lot of food and drank himself into a stupor. Deanna wanted to persuade him, but Spencer, under the influence of alcohol, accused her, saying, "Are you blaming me? It's because of you that we're finished. It's all your fault. You've made us like this. It's never safe here. You're always deluding yourself, living in your daydreams. Dad and Aiden's deaths. It's all your fault." Deanna trembled as she listened, feeling as though she had aged 10 years in an instant. She wouldn't care if others said such things, but this was her son. Could it be true that she had caused the death of her husband and youngest son? Walking down the street, Jessie suddenly noticed something amiss in one of the houses. She approached the window to investigate when a zombie lunged at her. Seeing the wound on its left arm, Jessie realized that the woman had chosen to end her life due to excessive pessimism. The commotion quickly attracted the attention of people nearby, further deepening the gloomy atmosphere in the community. Jessie took out the dagger from her waist and slowly opened a crack in the door. Following Rick's example, she thrust the blade into the zombie's head. This is the first zombie she has killed. Then she turned around, looking at the saddened women below, and spoke up. "I used to not want to face these things, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to confront the apocalypse. But now, things have become like this. We must be strong to face. We must fight to the end, or else we will all die." Of course, this was just a small incident within the community. What nobody expected was that Morgan was recounting his own experiences to one of the intruders who had been knocked unconscious earlier. He hoped that by sharing his story, he could convince the man to change his ways. The man found it somewhat amusing as he had never encountered such a saintly person before. He then lifted his shirt, revealing a knife wound on his abdomen. He told Morgan that he came to the community not only to scavenge for supplies but also to find medication. Little did he expect that some of the women in the community were quite formidable. He bluntly told Morgan, "If I hadn't died this time, I would have to kill you, and I would kill everyone here. Women and children would all die. That's my principle. So sorry, but your story doesn't work on me." Morgan stood up and walked out of the room, convinced that he would gradually influence this man with love. He locked the door behind him, as he didn't want the man inside to be discovered and beaten to death. He didn't want to witness such a scene. In the afternoon, Aaron noticed Maggie holding two strange objects, and he had a faint idea of what she intended to do. He followed her to the armory. Although Rick reassured everyone that Glenn would return, Maggie was still deeply concerned. She wanted to go out and search for Glenn. The fireworks tied to the two steel bars were to attract zombies. Aaron expressed his concerns, saying, "You're waiting for it to get dark, but have you considered what will happen if you twist your ankle when you jump off the fence? Or if a zombie grabs onto you when you get surrounded by other zombies?" Maggie thought he was trying to stop her, but Aaron replied, "I know I can't stop you, so I'll help you find a safe route." Aaron had frequently gone out before, and there was an underground drainage outlet they could use to exit the community. They quickly arrived there. In Maggie's heart, she had already prepared herself for Glenn's sacrifice because Michonne had told her that Glenn had said he would send a signal if he was alive. But so far, there had been no sign. The reason Maggie still wanted to go out was that she couldn't help but fantasize that Glenn was still alive. Maybe he was injured, trapped, or captured by someone. She didn't want to foolishly wait inside. They quickly reached the end, where they could now see the zombies near the fence. But when Aaron was about to open the gate, Maggie wasn't ready to stop him. Suddenly, Maggie changed her mind and didn't want to go out anymore. The community was under attack, and Aaron felt guilty. So he decided to go alone in search of Glenn. The noise also attracted the zombies, who started moving towards the passage. Maggie sorrowfully said, "I deleted all of Glenn's photos because I don't need them. I will live and die alongside Glenn, but I'm pregnant." In the evening, Deanna sneaked into the warehouse to get some food. Start to lose concentration as you walk. Her mind filled with her son's words from earlier in the day, leaving her feeling overwhelmed as a mother. At this time a zombie came towards her and she was so frightened that she dropped her things on the ground and looked at the zombie who stood up. Though frightened, Deanna thought of her son's words and wanted to change herself. As the zombie charged at her, she grabbed a bottle and stabbed it, but their height difference and her lack of experience in killing zombies resulted in her repeatedly stabbing the zombie's chest, and got himself covered in blood. Even after the zombie fell to the ground, she continued fiercely stabbing, letting out all her anger. She had no idea how many times she had stabbed the zombie until Rick, hearing the commotion, swiftly arrived and dispatched the zombie with a single blow. Deanna finally calmed down. Rick mentioned that this person had been severely injured by Carol in the armory, but they couldn't find the body until now. Deanna regained her composure and calmly told Rick, "I want to live. I want this place to survive." Her words carried a tinge of bitterness, but she understood that only Rick could save this place. This time, Rick didn't argue. He wasn't an ungrateful person and wouldn't actively seize power unless his own safety was at risk. Many people couldn't sleep that night. Aaron kept watch with Maggie at the fence. How Maggie longed for a sign to let her know that Glenn was alive. Rosita, in the other direction, was equally worried. Abraham hadn't been in contact and hadn't returned yet, which meant his situation was likely grim. Spencer came over to relieve them from their shift. With so many zombies around, he couldn't sleep either. Rosita said something to him that nobody else had said. "Well done on the truck thing. If you hadn't taken out the driver, the fence here would have been breached, and the zombies would have overrun this place." Compared to the rest of them who couldn't sleep, Rick finally found solace in the arms of his beloved.